Welcome to Larry the Alchemist, where we discuss all things heavy metal and hard rock. On today's episode, 5 things I don't like about heavy metal. Now, I am obviously a heavy metal fan. It is the music that I identify with. It is the music that I have followed since I was 10 years old. I've drifted away at times and came back, but I've always, even at times when I drifted away from certain aspects of metal, maybe I was into the more hard rock side of it. So it is the music that I love and that I follow, and that it's a part of my life. That said, I can recognize that there are things about heavy metal that I don't care for, that I have grown out of. I think sometimes as metalheads, we can be kind of protective and defensive of our type of music, and I think that's because it's kind of looked down upon by mainstream society. It's caveman, it's dumb, it's violent, it's all these other things. And so we can be a little bit protective of it, but I think it's okay. We're amongst friends here. We can talk freely and admit, or at least I'm going to admit, that there's some things about heavy metal that I don't really care for, that I don't like. All right, number one for me, and these are in no particular order, but number one for me are violent, sexist, or drug alcohol related lyrics. When I was 12 years old, I thought it was great, like, drinking, boozing, bagging women, that whole type of thing. But as I've gotten older, as I've become a parent, I have a daughter, I've come to view some of these lyrics as not liking them as much, or not caring for them, objectifying women, Spinal Tap, smell the glove type lyrics, stuff like that. I've just sort of grown out of that. The same thing with the drug and alcohol lyrics. I think we can all say now, I know a lot of people that watch the channel are around my age. We've seen the damage that drugs and alcohol have done to our famous rockers. Our favorite rockers have done to friends and family. So when I was 11 years old, I didn't understand that. I thought it was cool, the idea of, alcohol and doing alcohol and drugs and stuff like that. And but now that I'm older and I see the damage that has done to people, I don't think it's as cool anymore. So that's something that I also kind of look back on, and it's not my favorite part of metal. I've always been a fan. The lyrics that I always liked most from heavy metal were more fantasy type lyrics. Ronnie James Dio, dragons and castles, and Iron Maiden type lyrics, Judas Priest type lyrics. So I've never been a huge fan of just especially like in the 80s when it was just drinking, boozing, bagging women, that type of thing. That was never my favorite thing. But as I've gotten older, I've become even less of a fan of that. And also overtly violent lyrics. I think I mentioned this in my video about why I've never fully been able to embrace death metal, because death metal has a lot of this, at least in the early days. This is just another thing that I've just never been into. I'm a fan of horror movies, for instance, but I'm a fan of occult, 70s, hammer horror, Dracula, witches, graveyards, castles, that type of horror. I've never been a splatter gore or a violent type of horror type of thing. That has never appealed to me. So that's just the same way with lyrics. Like when I hear lyrics that are just like, I'm going to smash your head in with a sledgehammer, and I'm going to run you over with my car and all this other stuff. I'm just not into that type of lyrics. As I've gotten older, I'm even less into that kind of, like Cannibal Corpse style lyrics. That just doesn't do it for me anymore. All right, number 2, and this was kind of, I saw this in the 90s, really like starting to crop up in the scene, and not in the music that I listen to. So maybe this is a little unfair because I don't really like any of this music, a lot of the 90s type of metal. But I don't like what I call tough guy personas and tough guy lyrics. I'm thinking about like Pantera. Are you talking to me, punk? You better walk away. That kind of like respect, guys getting angry, tough guys. And I remember really seeing this when I used to go to all the Oz fests And I started seeing like all these like frat guys that, they want to mess somebody up in the pit. That was like their whole reason for going to the show, and people fighting and just like posturing and the whole. And I started to see it in the lyrics too, like these sort of angry, like, tough guy lyrics. Black Label Society has a little bit of that tone to it, that whole like Pantera type of thing. And I could just never relate to that. That's just not my personality. I'm a peaceful hippie lover, not a fighter guy. So I just don't like that. I always, again, the lyrics that I like are more like the sort of the quiet Ronnie James Dio, just sort of the cerebral, sophisticated, fantasy based type lyrics. All right, number 3, and this sort of ties into something that I just said there, and I've never been a fan of this. I've never been a fan of pits and slam dancing, and when I go to shows, I'm off live and let live. If that's what you're into, you want to go to the show, you want to do the whole pit thing, good for you. I've never liked that. I've never done it, never liked it. When I go to a show, I want to get into the band. I might bang my head, move around, air guitar, put my fist in the air, sing along. That to me is what going to a show is about. I don't like pits. I don't like when I'm at a show, and I'm sure this has happened to everybody, right? You're at a show, all of a sudden a pit breaks out, people are falling back into you, then I got to move, and that's the reason why, especially as I've gotten older, I certainly don't want to go anywhere near that. Now when I go to shows, I stay far away from it, and it's just, when I see it, I just wonder, like, it's about the music. It's about listening to the music and watching the performers on stage for me. I don't understand it. Maybe it's my age. Again, sort of in the 80s, the heavy pit stuff didn't really start till the late 80s, and the slam dancing and all that. I just never understood it. I've never been into it. I never really liked it, because to me it's kind of like you're not watching the band, you're not listening to the music, you're just sort of, but again, I don't understand it. If you're into diving into the pit and stuff like that, you can let me know what the appeal of that is down below. All right, number 4 for me is sound quality and production quality of albums and sound quality. I'm always sort of reminded, and this is especially a thing you've heard me rant and rave about. I haven't ranted about this in a while, but if you've been following the channel for any length of time, you've probably heard me talk about the loudness wars and compressed albums and no dynamic range and stuff like that. And this is all over heavy metal, especially modern, like from the 90s, mid 90s and on heavy metal productions. And I'm always, and what I'm specifically talking about is really loud, noisy records where you can't separate the instruments. There tends to be no bass frequency. There's not a lot of, can barely hear the bass guitar. Like for instance with Metallica, Cliff Burton is an amazing bass player, but you can barely hear him on those records, which is just such a shame. And that's such a common thing in metal productions and metal live shows too. I could put this as a slash record productions and live shows where it's just super muddy or it's really harsh sounding. And I'm always reminded of how bad this is when I spend a week or two not listening to metal. I've mentioned that I listen to a lot of dark wave and electronic music. When I'm listening to the electronic music for a week or so, and I come back to metal, and electronic music has this super big low end and real punchy sounds. Not that there isn't bad sounding electronic music, but the stuff that I listen to has a lot of low end to it. And then I go back and I listen to metal records, and it's just like there's just no bottom end to it. It's really loud and harsh sounding. When I spend time listening to like classical or jazz, I come back and the metal is like, and I'm talking about modern metal, most modern metal recordings. They're just so blasting and plastered, and I want to get into the albums. Like last night, I went to listen to Behemoth, the latest Behemoth record, and it's just so loud and so fatiguing that I just bailed on it after like 5 minutes. I was just like, I'm just not going to subject myself to this. I can't hear anything. It's just a splatter, a wall of sound. And it's so disappointing when that happens, when I'm like, I like this music, but it's so fatiguing on the ears. It's so compressed. It's so undynamic. Just ruins it for me. And that, unfortunately, is just like I said, all over heavy metal, which is really, really disappointing. Again, like, spend a week listening to. It doesn't even have to be like, just spend a week. Like when I'm only listening to vinyl for a while. If I'm sitting here listening to Pink Floyd and Fleetwood Mac and Steely Dan, and then I go back and I listen to Behemoth or something, it's your Cannibal Corpse. It's just like flattened. The sound is just so flattened and so unlistenable to me. So it's a really big disappointment for me how much metal albums don't sound that good from a production standpoint. And that's not even getting into like cutting and pasting and quantizing and, you know, like amp sims and stuff. You know, it makes me think of like the last so many Accept records that all kind of sound the same. And so that's just I could have put that as my number one. If I was ranking these, that would probably be my number one. All right, number 5 for me is, and this is more of a modern thing, and that's bands. I don't know how to quite say this, but like bands just locking into one thing and only doing one thing. When you listen back to the 70s, when you listen to Black Sabbath, Deep Purple, Uriah Heep, Rainbow, Thin Lizzy, UFO, and you could argue, are these heavy metal bands? Let's call them hard rock heavy metal bands. They did different things. They like the albums were always a little bit different. There were different things within the records. Think about Black Sabbath, you know, Volume 4. You got the heaviness of Under the Sun, but then you have changes. Yeah, and it's the same way with all the bands from the 70s and even from the early 80s. Bands tended to evolve and change. And now there's too many metal bands that we're a thrash band and we just thrash and play fast all the time. Every song is just thrashing, you know, in your face. Or it's death metal, it's brutal death metal, it's a pounding death metal. You know, it's 60 minutes of getting your head pummeled by a jackhammer. You know, there's just not as much variety. And it just seems like bands, they find their thing, and it's just like, we're this, and this is all we do now. Whereas the bands used to be a lot more experimental. Even Metallica, I mean, you know, a lot of people don't like the era of the Black Album era of Metallica. Or some people don't like anything Metallica has done since Master of Puppets or And Justice for All. But you got to at least respect the fact that Metallica changes their sound and they evolve and they try different things. Some of it fails, but they try different things and they try to do different things. And you know, I always felt kind of more the spirit of the 70s, and I feel like that's kind of been lost with a lot of bands. And I just find it so boring when I turn on a record and it's hard for me to listen to something that's just jackhammer death metal for 60 minutes or nonstop fast thrash. I mean, there's certain bands that do that well. They've got one thing and they just hammer that home. I mean, AC/DC does one thing pretty well. Each album, they're not a band that really changes their sound, but they do have subtle little variations. But I don't know, just for me, especially when it comes to heavy metal, there's too many bands that are just sort of have blinders on and are just doing one thing and that's it. All right, there you go. 5 things I don't like about heavy metal. I'm kind of curious to see if people who never follow, that have never seen any of my other videos, just see the title and blast me in the comments, because that does happen. People who don't watch the video, they just see the title of the video. They don't know anything about the channel and they just leave some nasty comment. Because like I said, obviously I'm a heavy metal fan, but you know, we're here. It's okay. We're here amongst friends. We can let our hair down and speak freely here. So if you have some things you don't like about heavy metal, let me know in the comments down below. Let me know what you think about the things that I don't like. What do you guys feel about these things? I mean, for some people, this is the things they may like about it. They may love the pit culture. They may love the production of modern heavy metal. They may love 90s tough guy personas or the lyrics and stuff like that. So, you know, to each his own. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Make sure you like and subscribe. To see you again. Make sure you stay heavy, stay metal.